You're listening to Mechanic.com.au podcast, Australia's #1 podcast for automotive service and repair professionals. This week's podcast is proudly brought to you by Gates, driven by possibility. I'm your host, Jason O, and today we're joined by Chris Marturano, Development Manager of Automotive at Gates Australia. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Good to be with you.
And hello from a lovely overcast Melbourne from a sunny Adelaide.
Mate, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here and share a little bit about Gates and what we do as a manufacturer and the Gates company in general. So,
yeah, we're going to have some fun today.
Pretty similar, mate. Dreary old Melbourne, 11 degrees as I was driving in this morning, and pretty bloody cold. So, looking forward to some better weather.
Yeah, well, look, I think it's going to come your way very soon. But right now, we're going to be talking about the past, present, and future of drive and timing belts. Probably one of the most important parts of a motor. Let's kick it in. Let's go straight away. Why was there a need for drive and timing belts in the start?
Josh, you're absolutely right. A really important part of an engine, and you absolutely hit the nail on the head, mate. It's not a sexy product, but there is a definite need for both drive and timing belts. I mean, a drive belt is used to drive the vehicle accessories, such as your alternator, your water pump, air conditioner, and the belt's engineered and designed to transmit the power it needs to be able to drive those components. In terms of a timing belt, it's a really critical part for the engine, and it's used to set the engine timing. The timing belt is a synchronous belt, and it connects the crankshaft and camshaft, so the engine valves open and close at the proper times during each cylinder's intake and exhaust strokes. So pretty complex sort of stuff, but that's what they do.
Well, let's talk. How did Gates get involved with a drive and timing belts in the very start?
Look, I guess it stems back. Gates has been around for over 100 years, and they were a company that was struck or born out of Denver, Colorado. Okay. And in the Australian market, I guess Gates globally saw a need in a marketplace that was still fairly immature, let's say, and they felt the need to set up here in Australia as their own identity. And I guess there was a need not only in automotive belts, but goes to a wide range of industrial products as well. Yeah,
and the name, the Gates name, was that from the founder?
Yeah, it certainly was. Back in 1911, Charles C. Gates was the founder, who basically bought a tyre and rubber company back in Denver, Colorado, all those years ago.
Far out, okay. Well, he'd be certainly very interested to see where his products have taken him today. And I did know that the tyre company also did leather as well. Is that correct?
Oh, look, they did. It was a combination of rubber and leather, and I guess back in those days they used all sorts of materials to be able to drive other components, and leather was one of them.
Well, here we are talking a bit to you about drive belts and timing belts. And the reason I draw your attention to the leather word is we've been having a look at retrospectively a lot of different products and brands today, and leather has featured quite significantly through suspension, transmission, clutches and bits and pieces and so forth. And here we are talking about the belts. What did those first belts look like?
Look, the first belts were pretty low-cost sort of engineering. It was basically leather dipped in twine and stuff like that.
Wow.
And the early stages, they were vulcanised in a mould to just make them a bit more robust. So coated fabric, it was dipped in rubber, cement coated with fabric and twine. And that replaced the old sort of hemp rope that was used on car radiator fans. So I'll tell you what, in today's modern vehicles, the synthetic age that we live in, rubber and rubber manufacturing and materials have certainly come a long, long way.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to also, be very mindful of the fact that in those early days, whilst we have a bit of a laugh and nostalgically look at them, the engines rotated at a lot lower RPM, so the load requirements, you weren't exactly running air conditioning pulleys or anything like that on them back in 1917, were you?
No, you didn't have any of those creature comforts, mate. And I don't think alternators were part of any automotive or any vehicle make in those very, very early days. But today with, air conditioners and alternators and power steering and all the other mod cons that we want, cars have certainly changed.
Yeah, they certainly have. And look,
Very much.
there's been a lot of milestones during that evolution to where we are today. Give us maybe a bit of a dot point on some of those.
Look, some of the milestones I guess the probably the greatest milestones have been in the design and development, the construction. You know, not only the construction of the belt and how it's progressed from a single belt to what we call today a micro V, but
All right.
encompassing that is also the material change over the years, going from twine and leather to
Yes.
synthetic rubbers, uh, the synthetic rubbers that we use today. And, it's all brought about by the engineering and pushing the engineering boundaries and making things more reliable and more efficient and able to get, more performance out of the products as well. You could imagine a belt or a leather drive belt being used on a vehicle of today. I don't think it would last very long at all.
Well, that's kind of actually ironic because if you ever watch that fabulous TV series Bush Mechanics, I think at one stage, on the old EH, they put a leather belt, they cut it in half and chuck it on the water pump on the old red or grey motor, and you could do that back then, but with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pulleys on the front of an engine, you simply just can't. You'd have to find someone quite big to steal their belt. Let's put it that much, wouldn't you?
Look, exactly right. I mean, leather and all sorts of things will transmit power to some extent, but how effectively and how efficiently do they do that? And I mean, the innovation of the drive belt being able to drive, like you said, many pulleys throughout the engine gives manufacturers the flexibility to be able to do that, whereas you probably couldn't do it with some of the leather stuff they used to use back in the day.
Yeah. I remember, from my mechanic days, seeing my first tooth belts and my first V drive belts and so forth, and looking at them and recognising that the friction and the connection was there for that efficiency. But it's only really when you appreciate some of these belts is when you cut them in half and have a look at what's running in a support capacity. They are truly an engineering marvel, aren't they?
Look, they are. There's so many components that goes to making up a belt. You've got your fabrics, your tensile cords, your wrapping, and eventually that whole package is vulcanized, so it all sort of glues and sticks itself together. But look, in the early days, some of the tensile cords, going back to things like cotton through polyester, nylon.
Yes.
Now, indeed, some of them are aramid fibres. So depending on the power required to drive the components, we'll use the appropriate tensile cord. That's the backbone.
And even things like Kevlar now as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Kevlar, aramid, yeah.
Now, are we seeing a decline in any type of belt at this point in time?
Look, not really. Belts go through a bit of a phase. If we're looking at driving components, we look at possibly less components being driven now by a belt. The innovations in belt technology now give us things like stretch fit belts, which can actually stretch between pulleys. Right. And what that does is eliminate the need to use a tensioning device. So many manufacturers where we've got a short span between two pulleys will opt for a stretch fit type belt. So they can eliminate the pulley. There's cost savings, there's labour savings, there's production savings to be had. The innovation continues. So belts, I guess, some of the traditional ways we move components within that engine bay may have changed. Some of the water pumps today are actually driven electrically, not driven by belts at all.
Well, that was going to be one of my next questions. As we look towards the modern engine, especially the hybrid and the electric engines, components are being reassigned around the engine bay and sometimes even to the rear, towards the axle or the front axle, wherever it is. Do you see the need for belts changing to accommodate this?
Look, they'll change in terms of material and performance and longevity of the product. I think Gates is really well positioned because not only do we do drive belts, we do other components made of rubber within that vehicle. And what we see is the evolution of the motor car, the increased hybridisation of vehicles and the electrification of vehicles over time. Well, they're going to call for different components that Gates produce. So cooling becomes a lot more complex. So
one of the things I saw on that was that you're changing your belts, and And I spoke a little bit earlier about the tooth belt profile. So the tooth belt that I saw, and I think it was on an old Ford 2-litre motor, one of those old overhead cam ones. But you guys have actually recognised that a rounder profile gives you better tooth engagement. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. The timing belt or a synchronous belt is there as a positive drive. So in an automotive application, we see them in the timing system. In industrial applications, you see them in all sorts of different systems. But the tooth profiles have changed over the years. Initially, it was a fairly square tooth. Look, great for its day and great in being able to transmit the power positively.
Yep.
That moved to a rounded tooth profile, and that was good as well. But what we found is there was still a degree of air being trapped under the tooth, and now they've moved to what they call a modified curvilinear design, which is basically
that's a mouthful, isn't it?
Big word. That's moved from basically a square to a round to a modified round, which gives you better connection between tooth and pulley, better degree of power transmission across the full width of the tooth. So that tooth actually absorbs more power as it's rotating through the system. And
hence works in a more efficient capacity, which is what you're looking for as well. Okay, well, let's move on to something a little bit behind the scenes, because we see these belts quite often from a workshop floor come to us with thousands and hundreds of thousands of kilometres on them. What sort of R&D do you guys do behind the scenes?
Look, R&D for us is really, really critical. And it's critical because we work with all the major car makers around the world. So they really do push the envelope of not only engineering in products, but material as well. So all our testing and things like that's done at Gates facilities throughout the world. And we test in a variety of different ways. And we push the engineering boundaries to be able to create and innovate new products and work with new materials to get those efficiencies that the vehicle manufacturers are looking for.
Well, I noticed that, as things change across, the different brands and the different ages and so forth, and new components are added to drive belts and so forth, and, Kevlar's added here and Kevlar's added there and so forth. The strength of these belts is something that's never ceased to amaze me. I once saw a car being wrecked out and it was just being held on by that one belt, that was holding onto the engine. Do you do a strength test, like a stretch test by any chance?
Look, we certainly do. Testing's really important, like I said before, and we need to ensure that we can meet the engineering specifications that are outlined by the vehicle manufacturer. So, and not only vehicle, but industrial machinery as well. So we do all kinds of belt stretch or tensile strength testing. We even expose the belt to destructive testing, such as, contamination, all over the top of belts, which deteriorates the belt material. And this is all to ensure that we manufacture a product that's reliable and performs to the specification and the expectations of that vehicle manufacturer. So testing, mate, is a huge part of the Gates business, and we spend a lot of money yearly on R&D.
Yeah. It's funny because, you think back into the days of old where they, mum or dad would always say, carry a spare, fan belt in the back of the car. The reality of it is that the equipment is so good. All you have to do is have it inspected on a regular occurrence when you have your servicing done to maintain that consistency. Let's fast forward, Chris. Let's jump in the time machine. We're going to go to 2040, a long way down the track. You and I will still look as good as we do today. But where will belts be, mate? What will they look like?
Mate, got no idea if I'll be here. Hope they come up with some new whiz-bang drugs that we can all take and prolong this life.
Yeah.
Look, belts, it's really hard to say. I mean, technology's moving very, very fast. And 2040, it's 20 years away.
Yeah, it is. It's a long way down the road, but it will come up quick, won't it? Absolutely. Internal combustion engines, well, what's their future beyond hybrid and electrification? Yeah, who knows? So, look, really, really hard to tell what's going to happen in 2040. Look, we believe the current generation of drive belts and drive belts in general are going to be around for a little while yet. Well, there's an interesting, I'm just sort of thinking while you're talking, and some of the people we've talked before in the podcast, the belt, the leather belt, we talked about that. It's been attached to things like suspension and transmission. And when you think about it, a timing belt transmits power around so things can run. In the world of electricity, you're still going to need to transmit things, and you're still going to need comfort. So a timing belt can act as a bit of a dampener in some cases, can't it?
Look, exactly what it's meant to do. It is that sacrificial link between two hard parts or two components transmitting power between one and the other. So
okay,
by its very nature, that's what it's going to be doing.
I think you and I are going to be around in 20 years, and we are going to have belts. There's no doubt in my mind. And I know there's a lot of enthusiasts and car enthusiasts out there. They are still going to want to be looked after in the future, aren't they?
Spot on. Like I said, I reckon drive and timing belts are going to be around for a while yet. I guess the changes we see and what you mentioned there in 2040, the vehicle manufacturers are driven by the consumer demand. They want to aim and produce a vehicle that people are going to want. So R&D, again, to us is pretty critical. Pushing that engineering and material science is a real important part.
We are moving in very exciting times, and it's going to be very interesting to see where we end up with a lot of our different products. But look, let's start to head towards the door for this one here. I've got one more question for you. What's maybe one of the facts that a lot of our coalface mechanics and business owners don't know about Gates? What's something we don't know about you guys?
Look, this is something that was brought to my attention as well, and it's something that we're pretty proud of. And as a Gates community, we're a global company employing about 15,000 people. But and we're in over 100 different locations and countries around the world. So it is a large business. One of the facts that surprised me was if you take out the manufacturers of things like tyres, Gates Rubber Company is considered the world's largest non-tyre rubber company in the world.
Wow.
How's
okay.
That a fact?
Yeah, that's actually a bit mind-blowing, because you just you assume, I mean, it's hard to go past all the tyre manufacturers, isn't it?
Yeah, look, of course. And what they do, they obviously make a product, and all cars and trucks have many of them. But when you're talking a rubber production of, we're talking today about belts, but we as Gates, as a manufacturer a lot of other rubber components, such as our applicated hose, so radiator hoses, fuel line hoses, vacuum tubing, and so on, and even into the sphere of hydraulics. So that's a really big segment for us. So Gates, the automotive side is one part of our business. We do branch off into other parts as well.
Well, we have had quite a few interesting off-air discussions here about the different verticals that some of the companies are employing to become future-proofing their business, and it sounds like Gates is well and truly moving towards that period of time.
Look, we've been around for 100 years, 1911. We celebrated our centenary a little while ago. And look, we reckon we're going to be around for a lot longer yet.
Oh, I think they definitely will. Well, listen, thank you very much for coming on the show today, Chris. It's been a pleasure having you, and we've certainly learnt a huge amount about Gates and the drive and timing belts. And look, if any of our listeners have any follow-up questions about anything we've discussed here today, they can go ahead and reach out to Gates via the Mechanic.com.au community. If you're not already a member of Mechanic.com.au, join the thousands of other mechanics around Australia who are earning, learning and networking more at Mechanic.com.au, the home of Australia's mechanics, by creating a free account today. Thanks for tuning into the Mechanic.com.au podcast, Australia's #1 podcast for automotive service and repair professionals. If you want to unlock a whole host of trade-only resources, including our private community, competitions, educational content, job opportunities, training, troubleshooting, and much, much more, go ahead and create a free account now at Mechanic.com.au. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Mechanic.com.au podcast soon.